Hello everybody. Hello, I hope you're here. I hope you can. I need to do something here. Put the chat on. I hope I'm here. I hope somebody can see and hear me. Oh, Trisha just said hello. So a couple of people just said hello. So must be on. Susan O and Digger, who I've been told is a bear. Lovely sunshine, you're absolutely right. Much better weather than when I originally scheduled this tour for. So not only can I actually see and speak to you today, which is a huge difference, we're actually going to see, I think, better views of the town today because the weather is so much better. Hello to Tish and hello to Susan, hello to Trisha, hello to Elizabeth and Tanzia, and hello Beatrice. Hi Beatrice, lovely to see you. Hello Robin, you're getting a severe snowstorm. Wow. Okay, well we've hopefully had our snow for the winter. All 4 or 5 days of it that we had. Hello Fran, hello to everyone. Holding all the rain and wind in Cardiff for me. Thank you Claire. Hold it back, come on, struggle for just another hour and you can let it go. I don't care after that. Hello Mary, hope you're well. Very wet and windy Cornwall, but you had beautiful Northern Lights views last weekend. Elizabeth, 8 to 12 inches of snow. Doesn't sound good. We have a word for 8 to 10 inches of snow. It's called a decade of winters. So good to see everybody here in Southwell today. And you didn't see them, Mary. Oh, that's a shame. But the main problem with the Northern Lights is it's at night when sensible people are tucked up in their beds. And people who live in big cities like us, even on the high ground, have got absolutely no chance. Apparently, not too far from where we are in Shropshire, up in some of the dark sky areas up there, they had some beautiful Northern Lights sightings. Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Very inconsiderate of them, isn't it, Tish? Those lights appearing at night of all times. I mean, come on. But apparently we're going to have good Northern Lights for at least until the middle of the year. So I'm really hoping that when we go to Wales on holiday in the summer that there's still going to be some Northern Light activity because there's some real good dark sky areas very close to where we're going to be. Hello to everybody who is just joining us. Hello Ronnie, hello Linda, hello Leslie, hello to anyone else who snuck in who I didn't see. What time is it? No, nearly time. Let me just check. Now I heard, I've been told that the chat took a long while to come through on Thursday, and I said, oh, I've got 3 minutes to go, but by the time I actually saw that on the screen, I only had about like 1 minute to go. So I'll start soon. Chocolate's locked up. Why, what's it done wrong? It's tempted you. It's excessively tempting behaviour in a public place. No, it is lovely here today. It's a little bit chilly when the wind blows, but it is a lovely winter's day today to take a walk around. A low sun, of course, at this time of year. Hello, Trista. Hello to both of you. Hello, Sandy. Nice to have both of you here. We've got a lot of good historical links, as we always find pretty much everywhere we go. And I will do that, Robin. I will do that when I get home later tonight because it's a Southwell tour and then off down to Nottingham to watch my team, the Nottingham Panthers, on the back of their fantastic European trophy win, Continental Cup win in the hockey last weekend. So looking forward to that later as well after the tour. So I'm thinking it must be about time, and we'll make a start very soon. Hello, singing Cheryl. I'm just checking. I don't want to misname anybody. Oh, thank you, Claire. So, got a 1 minute warning. Well, I think the chat's a bit quicker today then. And so I think it's about time to go. Thank you to everybody. So a warm welcome. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that when you read the title of this tour, the place I'm going to be, you're going to be thinking, oh, Southwell, where's that? And I'm going to be saying to you, welcome to Southwell. So it's constantly a kind of a source of debate. Traditionally, the name was pronounced much more like Southwell in the local area around Nottinghamshire, which is where we are. We're about 15 miles northeast of Nottingham itself. I'm in the very rural part of northeast Nottinghamshire, and Southwell. People around here do tend to call it Southwell. I think that's partly because it's quite a posh area, and so it sounds a little bit more upmarket to say I live in Southwell than I live in Southwell. But everybody else in Nottinghamshire pronounces it Southwell, and so that's what I'm going to call it, because that's what I've always called it. The name does come from the fact that it was a southern well for this particular area, although nobody quite knows what well that referred to, because there were numerous springs and streams and water sources that were established around the settlement here. There's been a settlement here since Roman times. They found a huge Roman villa when they were excavating around the area of the Minster, and we'll be around that area later. Nothing you can see of those Roman remains, but a big medieval history, Tudor, Stuart and Georgian history as well. And one of the things that is notable about Southwell is that it is the smallest cathedral town in England, and that's because Southwell Minster is the name of the cathedral, but it was designated as Nottinghamshire's cathedral back in 1884. And Southwell has a population of only about 8,000. It's never been really very industrial place, and so the population never sort of expanded rapidly in the 19th century. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to make a start. Oh, there's the low sun. Spin around this way, and we're kind of on the edge of the town here. And the town, one of the reasons the town was not didn't really become industrialized was because it's not on any real major long distance roads, and it's in quite a sort of remote rural area, and it's not directly on a major river, certainly not on a navigable river, so it wasn't sort of for trade and industry. It wasn't really the place. I'm just waiting to see where these cars go here. And so that meant that it sort of never really became a big industrial place. It did have some industries. Looking down the road ahead of us there, we're looking down towards a huge building on the left-hand side, which was an old grain mill, which was built in the 19th century. So there's a lot of farming around here, a lot of agriculture, and so the grain mill was there. And it's next to the river that flows around the edge of Southwell, which is called the River Greet, like greet when you say hello to someone, same spelling. And that's a short river, just runs for a few miles through this part of Nottinghamshire and flows into the River Trent. Also down by the river there you have the site of the old railway station. It was on a branch line, it wasn't a main railway route that went through here. The old railway line is now a nature trail, and on the site of the old station house there's now a pub called the Last Whistle, or the Final Whistle, sorry. That's nothing to do with a sporting reference. It means the final whistle of the last train departing from the station when it closed down in the middle of the 20th century. So we had the grain mill down there, and also there were hop fields close to here. And so down by the river there were some sort of quite marshy areas, and they were hop fields, and the row of cottages that we can see across the way there was originally a malt house. It was for the malting of some of the local grain, and for storage of some of the hops, so for the local breweries. Now we're in a sort of a part, sort of on the edge of the town here. So the main town centre was under the control of the local landowners, but very important in the history of Southwell because of the minster was the Archbishops of York, because the Southwell Minster that's now the cathedral was the preserve of the Archbishop of York. So the Archbishops of York owned a lot of land around here, and the Bishop's Palace that we'll see was kind of one of their residences, sort of part way between their home diocese in York and the capital in London. And this part of town was a separate manor owned by the Archbishops of York, and land was rented out for smallholders who were called toft holders, T-O-F-T, toft holders, and they paid rent to the archbishops. And this sort of open area was left green. They sometimes have events, and they've had fairgrounds on it and things like that over the years. And this part of town is called the burgage. So the burgage plots were the parcels of land that the archbishops rented to the people. But one of the things it was used for in the 19th century was for the construction of a lockup. So this was the jail. This was the local jail, the lockup. The House of Correction, as it was rightly called. So that's the original entrance to the House of Correction, which is now blocked up. It's called the House of Correction. Originally they had space for 35 inmates, but then they greatly expanded it, and it became a prison for around 150 inmates, and they would be labouring in there, maybe working in some of the local agriculture, and they also would have had a treadmill that was part of the punishment. They had to spend so long on the treadmill, and we can see some of the original buildings remain. Some of them have been replaced with modern ones. It's been converted into apartments, and the House of Correction, the original layout has been retained with the modern apartments. In between being a prison and being modern apartments, it was actually a lace manufacturing facility. So that's one of the big industries down in Nottingham. And what would happen would be that lace would be kind of the basic fabrics would be made in sort of factories outside Nottingham here with a good water supply. And then in Nottingham city centre itself, the decorative artistic work on the lace would be done. So it was kind of a local industry that sort of caught in all of the area, really. So these are lovely houses here on the Burgage. And got the original buildings where the prison governor would have lived, and almost next to it we have the old courthouse and police station, built in 1884. And that was really the year when the land here ceased to be the preserve of the church. It was when this ceased to be the come under the Archbishops of York. It was when the actual Minster became a cathedral, and then the bishops here had their own lands around the cathedral, but this area then passed into the ownership of the local government, which is why you had the courthouse, the police station, the prison, all here. Nowadays they have a bridal shop in there, but it's also part of it. The old police station belongs now to the town council as well. And the old courthouse. So you didn't go far. Police station, old courthouse, and it was all downhill from there, down to the House of Corrections for a bit. Slippery slope. Oh, highly cold. I didn't see any horses. Maybe there were some horses, I don't know. Didn't see any. People walking their dogs. Oh, some lovely snowdrops here under the tree. Let's take a look at these. Look, how beautiful. Nice to see them. Lovely snowdrops. Always nice to see some snowdrops this time of year. No, got some dogs, no horses. Sun's dropping down behind the clouds. Blue sky still there though. Now the oh, it could be the wind noise. So the large yellow coloured house ahead of us, one of the largest houses in this part of town. So as you can imagine, it was once the residence of some pretty wealthy people. I think it's now divided, as most of the large houses are, into multiple apartments. It's had a very famous resident between 1803 and 1808. Lord Byron lived here. Lord Byron lived here with his mother. Essentially, when he inherited the title of Lord Byron as still quite a young boy, the ancestral seat of Newstead Abbey was in a pretty poor state of repair, and so while Newstead Abbey was being renovated, they lived here in Southwell, and that's where they stayed, and they would pop down to Newstead. It's not that far away, to check up on the progress of the work. And it was while he was living here, still as a young boy, that Byron had his first poetry published by a publisher up in a large market town not too far from here called Newark. That's where his first publisher was based. And they were, as you can imagine, quite active members of the local social scene. Certainly there's a couple of the places where we know that Byron was part of a local dramatic group. He appeared on stage in a variety of plays. I think he would have been pretty ideal for amateur dramatics. I think, you know, I think he might have been hamming it up a bit, old Byron. I just get that hunch. So I don't know how much scandal there'd have been in that house, because he was living with his mother, who by all accounts was quite domineering. But he certainly he was building up his energy for later, saving his energy. So a great house associated with one of our most famous and notorious in some ways romantic poets, Lord George Byron. Mad, bad and dangerous to know, as they say. So here on the Burgage is one of the town's war memorials, as we can see. To see the Burgage. So when I was planning this tour, I thought, well, there's a couple of different routes we could take from here. We could either go straight along the main street down through the town centre, or we could go a slightly more out of town route. I chose the latter because the town centre, it's nice to see, but I just thought it's a bit nicer to go and see a bit more greenery, and for me to tell you a little bit more about some of the prominent people who were based here. And I hope the signal is going to hold up. We're pretty good here so far. Talking of Natalie's tour, did anybody see on Facebook those that huge lizard thing that she was filming on a trip to the Galapagos Islands? Wow, it looked really cool, that did. So we're really in an area with some of the biggest houses. You know, this was an area where people who had been very wealthy down in Nottingham and the surrounding area. So Nottingham had its very successful textile industry, hosiery, and the lace making. So families involved in that business had houses out here in the countryside in the 18th, 19th centuries, and also people who were the owners of agricultural lands and also the coal mines. So we're very close to the Nottinghamshire mining areas where we had some, some of the best deep coal mines in England, and the owners of those, before they were nationalised, they were also very wealthy, and showing that with some of the grand buildings here in Southwell and surroundings as well. But it was really in the 19th century when the church sort of ceased to become the main political force in the area, and more of the responsibility for local affairs passed into the hands of the local government. And this house is notable for its role in that, because it was owned by a man called the Reverend J.T. Beecher. Now, he was not a reverend from the Minster. He was from one of the local parishes, and he was a parish priest, and he was involved in local governance, and he was one of the people who helped to set up some of the places of law and order, the civic facilities in Southwell. One of the things that you can visit in Southwell today, about a mile outside of the town centre, is the Southwell Workhouse, which has been restored by the National Trust. It's absolutely fascinating. So the workhouse was a place where, if people were very poor, the local authorities provided a place where people could go and they would get basic accommodation, basic food, and they would work to pay for it. It was really kind of a social stigma to go into the workhouse, so people would really try to avoid it, but it was a way of housing and providing some kind of provision for the poorest people in society, and it was organised through the local parishes. And as slightly larger towns, Southwell's workhouse sort of covered the town and some of the outlying areas, and the Reverend Beecher was one of the sort of local figures who set up the workhouse. This was his house, Hill House, which, as you can see, it had some of the windows bricked up when they trying to save money on the window tax. Later it was acquired by the town's main school, the Southwell Minster School, and it was a residence for the boys who were the pupils at Southwell Minster School. Now it's private apartments, Hill House. So let's go down the side of it. Beecher's Walk, named after him. I shall let this gentleman come.
It's okay.
Hello?
He's a bit scared of what you've got in your hand.
He's looking at me very suspiciously. Dogs react one of two ways to gimbals. They either seem scared of them, or they think it's one of the things that you throw a ball from, and then they think you're going to play with them. Emma's got a talent for picking oakum. Yes, she has. She was very good at it. You can get to try some of the tasks they had to do when they were in the workhouse when you go there. I have to post my picture of Emma picking oakum on the on Facebook later. Yeah, the workhouse was not a... The idea of the workhouse really was that, you know, by law they had to provide this. But obviously they didn't want to have a situation where they would have it, people who almost saw it as a lifestyle choice. We get exactly the same arguments now, you know, that if your social security system is too generous, people would just choose to live on social security instead of going out to work. You know, you hear these same arguments in modern politics, and they were sort of almost they didn't want to make them a place where that would be anything like attractive to people. The idea was that it was a place you would really only go into if you absolutely needed to, you know, because families would be split up within there, you know, male and female. The generations were split up, so, you know, they didn't have like family rooms or anything like that. You would find that a lot of the agricultural workers, they'd be very busy in the planting season, the growing season, the harvesting season, but then in the winter time, obviously they had very little work, and so they would be very much struggling through those months. So the occupation of the workhouse was also quite seasonal. So on the edge of the town, the gardens are quite big, and there's quite a lot of land as well, with a lot of trees planted and a lot of fruit trees. And Southwell is known for one particular type of fruit, and that is the apple, and specifically the Bramley apple, one of the best known types of cooking apples. So when you have your lovely apple pie and apple crumble with cream or custard in an English tea room, probably going to be having Bramley apples within that. And just over where we can see over to the trees there, we have the original place where the Bramley apples were cultivated, and they were cultivated for the first time by a lady who rented the house there in the early 19th century. And so she was growing these particular apples. It was a new kind of cultivar of apple. I don't know quite how you make a new cultivar of apple, but she did. And then the house and land was taken over by a man called Matthew Bramley, and he continued to grow them. And a local nursery owner said he'd like to take some cuttings from this new type of apple, grow them in his nursery, and start to sell these apples at the local markets. And Bramley agreed to that on the understanding that he called the apples Bramley's seedling. And so they became known as Bramley apples, after the owner of the land where the original tree was. He wasn't the person who actually created the cultivar. He wasn't actually even the person who started to grow them commercially and sell them, but he was the person who owned the land where the original tree is still there, apparently, but it's on private land. There used to be a pub right by there called the Bramley Apple, and it used to have a big sort of, I can't remember, was it wood? It might have been wood, or might have originally been wood, and then sort of maybe fiberglass or something later, a huge apple outside, a three-dimensional thing, not just a sign. It was like a local landmark for many years. But the pub was taken over and renamed. I don't know what's happened to the big apple. I'd love to know where it is. So we're going to very soon be down by the cathedral, Southwell Minster. So it began life as a minster, and a minster church was a very particular kind of church. a minster church was kind of a central church in a rural area. So you'd have a large church that would be kind of the main church for that area. And then you would have a group of priests who would then go and preach in the different little villages. When it first started in Anglo-Saxon times, they might not yet have had their own churches. So those priests would live as a community here. So it wasn't a monastery, but it was a sort of a community of priests who would go out and preach to the local villagers. And that tradition continued in right up to the 19th century. And you have around Southwell a number of beautiful houses that belong to the church. Over the years, those types of priests became known as prebendaries, and the houses that they have here in Southwell were called prebends. Most of them would have a land and maybe even a house in the village they were responsible for, but they also had a substantial house here in Southwell. And so many of them rented the houses in Southwell, and they all still exist with the original names in private hands these days. Different apartments now, you can see 6 apartments in that one, look. And that's called the South Muscombe Prebend. South Muscombe is a village close to here. So this is the area where they discovered a huge Roman villa, and where they also excavated on the site of the Roman villa the remains of the first Anglo-Saxon church that was ever here. So here another one, another beautiful 18th century house. You know, the church had these great houses, and these guys had the rent from these as part of their income as priests. This is called the Normanton Prebend, again another of the local villages. So the first church that we know of here, established in the Anglo-Saxon age, so about 1300 years ago, by the very first Bishop of York, a man by the name of St. Paulinus. And Paulinus established a minster church here as part of the efforts to establish the Christian church in this rural area of England, which had still got a lot of the pagan beliefs from the old Saxon days, and later they had to almost re-establish Christianity a second time, because this was the part of the country where the Vikings were. So they were coming back in with pagan beliefs. But Paulinus was the man who created this first Saxon minster church here. But over the years, it was, as its wealth increased, the archbishops of York became one of the positions that was the most senior clerical and often political positions in the kingdom. Still to this day, within the Anglican Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury is at the top of the hierarchy, and the next most senior post is the Archbishop of York. And so in Norman times, between the 12th and the 13th centuries, brand new Norman church was created by the Norman Archbishops of York, very powerful. And that is what we see today, this beautiful, largely Norman cathedral that remains here at Southwell Minster. So that central tower, absolutely typically Norman. And that is, you see the square shape of the tower, the semicircular topped windows in the tower. That tower is almost identical to Tewkesbury Abbey, which is regarded as one of the very finest monastic buildings from the Norman age. Isn't that a beautiful? And we can see straight in front of us here on the right, this is the chapter house from the 13th century. So chapter houses are something that we usually associate with monasteries. But here, this was not a monastery, but you did have this community of priests. So it was the place where they would meet to discuss the business of the church and to pray together and to study together. So, you know, it has a lot of the features of a monastery church, but although it never was one. Over this side, this is the more modern area where some of the clergy lived. This was begun in the late 17th, early 18th centuries. And it was called the Dean's House and the Vicar's Close. So it was where some of the priests lived, some of the secondary clergy who were working in the cathedral, the leaders of the choir, the church administrators, and the dean, who was the senior clergyman here when this was being built, was a chap who I have spoken about on another of my tours. His name was William Mompesson, and William Mompesson was the priest in the plague village of Eyam, who sealed off that village and led the villagers in their sacrifice to avoid the spread of the plague. He left Eyam and he got a promotion into the church, and he became the Dean of Southwell Minster later in his career, and so he was the first dean to live in these buildings. The dean still has a residence and offices in there, along with some of the, you know, the church, the cathedral administrative offices. When you come on if you book like a group visit to the cathedral, especially, I came a couple of times when I was a teenager with my friends, and he was from an Anglican church in this diocese, and if one of the churches came as a group for a cathedral tour, they got to go and have tea and cake and things like that in the dean's residence afterwards. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do that on a couple of occasions when I was a teenager. Although I seem to think when we got later in our teens, me and my friend went to the pub instead. Or maybe as well, I don't recall. So you can see beautiful Georgian buildings in this part of town. These are the prebends, these beautiful houses that the priests would be renting out and that would belong to the minster for their priests in the different parts of this rural area of Nottinghamshire. And you really see that this whole area is the preserve of the church. And here's the beautiful minster. Just look at this. We're gonna one of the things that Southwell Minster is particularly known for, because it sort of straddles that age, the early Norman time, when a lot of sort of things from the Anglo-Saxon era were still kind of hanging on. It's known for some of its naturalistic, pagan-like designs, particularly what we call the Green Man, these foliage with the face pointing out of them. It's based on an old kind of fertility motif, really, but it's very often found in the Norman churches when some of those sort of traditional English styles were still hanging on. And Southwell is known for its Green Man figures, particularly in the chapter house. Some beautiful, like, naturalistic carving of plants and animals. Just going to show you the beautiful porch on this side, which again, look at this Norman archway. This is a semicircular archway, so not a pointed archway, it's not Gothic. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Doorway and archway. Dawn, I'm going to try. I don't know whether my signal will hold out, so let's just take a look. just take a look if we can. So look at this. Now I don't know whether you still are with me or not. Looking inside the church here. Gorgeous. It's one of the most intact Norman cathedrals because it wasn't a cathedral until 1884 when the Gothic age came in. Yes, the minster was kind of extended and Gothic windows were installed, and there are some Gothic features. And thank you. So we're going to come outside again. We managed to get just about enough of a look. Somebody jumped out the baptismal font. So the Norman architecture is still very much intact. Now we're going to head off the cathedral precincts for a moment because we want to go for a royal connection. Always good to have a royal connection. So hopefully we've got a restored picture now we're back outside in the big wide world. And we can get another fantastic look at this beautiful Minster church. That's just, that's a Norman church. It's a big surprise because, you just don't expect to find something like that in a little town like this, being the cathedral for such a large county. The city of Nottingham has no Anglican cathedral. It has a Roman Catholic cathedral, but it has no Anglican cathedral, and this is the Anglican cathedral for Nottinghamshire, including the city itself. So more beautiful Georgian houses. These are not ones that belong to the church. These were private ones as we get up towards the centre of town, because it was a market town, mainly on a local basis. As I said, it didn't really have a lot of, wasn't really on a lot of main long distance routes, so it wasn't a huge commercial centre in medieval times, but it was a centre of trade for this rural area. And because of the minster, it always had sort of quite wealthy people living here, because you had people who worked for the archbishops of York, and it was a place where monarchs would stay. If they were going up towards the north of England, then this was a place where they could stay. The Archbishop's Palace at Southwell Minster was a place where many of the medieval monarchs started to stay. But we're going to be talking about a monarch who had quite a different experience here. We got one of the oldest and best known coaching inns of the town of Southwell, across the way there, the Saracen's Head. There is an inn recorded on that site from the first recording of an inn on that site was in 1376, and it's still a pub and hotel today. And it is best known for an incident in the year 1646. We're in the middle, or towards the end, I guess, of the first phase of the English Civil War, when King Charles I is on the run. His armies are being defeated by the parliamentarians. The royalists are sort of on the run, and Charles I is trying to keep out of the hands of his enemies. And he was travelling through this area in disguise, and he came to Southwell, and he realised that he couldn't keep escaping. And so he decided that rather than hand himself into the parliamentarians, he would give himself up to the Scottish commissioners. Now they were sort of church and political leaders, military leaders as well from Scotland, who he thought, because his family, the Stuart family, were originally a Scottish royal dynasty, but they might be a little bit easier for him to deal with and might kind of help him negotiate his way out of it a little bit more than the parliamentarians actually would. And so Charles came here disguised as a clergyman and stayed at the Saracen's Head, and he was subsequently then accosted and arrested by the Scottish, who were actually based here at the Archbishop's Palace, and he was taken over there. We're going to go there very shortly. And then they didn't really go along with what his plan had been, because they sold him essentially. They took a big payoff and in return handed him over to the parliamentarians shortly afterwards, and that was how he ended up to be in his enemies' hands, and eventually after a couple of foiled escapes and various plots, he ended up having his head chopped off. And so this is where Charles I spent his last nights of freedom back in 1646. It's a fantastic pub. He stayed in the original part of the pub, which is at the bit on the left as you go through the archway here. Still a really cool place. You can see the historic nature of the building as you come through here. Still do very nice food, drinks, and they have nice rooms as well. So, how far are we from anywhere? 132 miles from London, 12 miles from Mansfield, 8 miles from Newark, and 15 miles from Nottingham. Should be called the King's Head, Susan. Well, it was, in the time that King Charles stayed here, it was called the King's Arms. But then, when the parliamentarians had sort of taken power, I think they didn't want to be associated with the king, especially as having been a place that kind of let him stay there when he was on the run. They didn't want to be thought of as loyal to the old royalist regime, and so they changed it to it was changed to the Saracen's Head at that point. They never changed it back. So this is the main road that runs out of the town, and just a little way up the road forks, and the main road on the left goes down towards Nottingham. A couple more of these grand houses belonging to the church, these prebend houses here, and I wanted to come this way not just to show you them, because it's just a reminder of the wealth of the church and the importance of the minster. Beautiful here. And this one is called Rampton Prebend. Rampton is a village in North Nottinghamshire and was under the auspices of the Minster here. The name Rampton is known in more modern times for another reason, as being the location of a hospital for the criminally insane. Can we call it that? Is that politically correct? I don't know. That's what it was designated as. So a lot of the kind of serial killers, notorious murderers who were found to have been insane or who pled insanity, that's where they were incarcerated, in Rampton, not this house, in Rampton, the village, and the priest who dealt with Rampton, this was his property here in Southwell, and they've laid it out with this beautiful recreated knot garden in front of it there. Isn't that gorgeous? But all of these prebends worked for the Minster, and we've seen the side of the Minster, we've been inside it, and we're going to get a great view here of its two beautiful pointed Norman towers. Very, very unusual design of church. Exactly Leslie Rampton's like Broadmoor. You don't get many churches in England that have this style of design. This is more kind of a German style. So what we call the Norman style in Europe would be called Romanesque, and this would be called kind of German Romanesque. If you go to places like Münster in Germany, the cathedral in Münster, one of the biggest German cathedrals, has these kind of pointed Romanesque towers on it, and but not that typical in England actually, but a beautiful feature. And as you can imagine, these towers, you see them from miles around, you know, really dominated the local area. So you could really imagine the local people being in absolute awe of the power and the wealth and the magnificence of the church here, and you know, the archbishops of York, who were often here staying. You know, they broke their journeys to and from London here. It was a place they could get away a little bit from their main residences, you know, to perhaps have a little bit of a break if they were dealing with some issues, or, you know, even archbishops in medieval times, they need a little holiday from time to time. A lot of monarchs would come here, they'd come here passing through, but a lot of monarchs would also come here because there were hunting grounds in the area. Of course, we're in Nottinghamshire, very famous for the Robin Hood legends, and Sherwood Forest. Sherwood Forest was a royal hunting area, and a lot of the medieval monarchs had hunting lodges built in the area, so they would come here from London, and while they were here they might well stay also at the Archbishop's Palace here in Southwell, one of the grandest buildings in the area. So another fantastic Norman doorway here, and a Norman doorway. Now, these days, the bishop lives over there, one of the big houses over there. But we have parts remaining of the original Archbishop's Palace. Now, most of the palace is ruined, but we do still have one section that is called the Great Chamber, or the Great Hall, and I'm going to try and go in there, and I'm hoping that my signal stays while I'm in there. I'm really hoping. And this is the medieval building here. This is 15th century, and this has remained pretty well intact, still usable today. It's used for all kinds of civic and church functions today, and we will be walking in the footsteps of some of the very famous monarchs of England. Richard the Lionheart, King John, Richard II was in here, but one of the most famous men to spend any period of time here was an Archbishop of York, a man by the name of Thomas Wolsey, Cardinal Wolsey, chief minister to King Henry VIII, and charged with trying to get Henry VIII out of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. And Wolsey was, as a cardinal of the church, he was charged with convincing the Pope to actually annul Henry's marriage to Catherine. So he was in residence here while he was preparing the documents. He wanted to get away somewhere where he could really think carefully about what he was going to do. So he came to his palace, his Archbishop's Palace here in Southwell, where he made those documents to send to the Pope. When he was unsuccessful and he fell out of favour with Henry VIII, he didn't want to go straight back to York, where there would still be a lot of hoo-ha surrounding him. he came again for several months to lick his wounds and to plan how he might possibly be able to save his political career and indeed his head. And he stayed here in 1530 while he was trying to sort that out. So very, very important figure. Oh, thank you, Beatrice. So let's give this a try, shall we? There's a lovely painting, and painting of a family up. So we're going to go upstairs. Okay, so here we are. Well, I'm sorry guys, you know, we are in a 700-year-old building, and so we are hopefully getting as good a signal as we can. And we are here in the Great Hall. And hopefully you can pick out enough just to see the grandeur, this beautiful wooden medieval ceiling, all of the coats of arms and the pictures, and to think of all of those great kings and figures in English history being on this floor where we are walking here. Actually, the floor's been replaced with a modern one. It's not the original floor surface, but to think they've been here in this room, it's pretty amazing. It's very similar to what you'd find in an Oxford or Cambridge college in terms of the great halls and the layout here with the raised stage at one end. And there's Cardinal Wolsey, got the lights shining on him. Here's King Charles I on the. This is where he was held by the Scottish forces before he was handed over to the parliamentarians. Here he is. Oh, that's better. There he is. Yeah, amazing, amazing windows. And we have this window seat here, which has got information about just some of the monarchs who have stayed here on it. The third, the first. A beautiful ceiling as well in here. Robin, he wasn't in his counting. Well, he'd have been counting out his money, but the archbishops of York definitely had plenty of money in themselves. I mean, Cardinal Wolsey was a hugely wealthy man in his time. Got good internet signal. No, he said, a Wi-Fi signal, my kingdom for a Wi-Fi signal, I think he said. This is now used by what is known as the Song School, which is the Minster Choir. They use this building. They might have said now is the winter of our disconnection. Oh dear. So the Great Hall remains of the Archbishop's Palace. But as we can see, most of the Archbishop's Palace, the actual residential building, imagine how large this would have been. You know, this was a real, genuine medieval palace with the Great Hall, and then you'd have had all the residential quarters here and beautiful gardens as well. You know, befitted someone of the importance and wealth of the Archbishops of York. I don't know what the oldest grave in the graveyard is. I mean, of the ones that are now marked, I know that when they were excavating the area, when they were doing building work, they found an old Saxon graveyard with several hundred sets of remains in it that were sort of, you know, 1300 years old. But what have we got here? I mean, they look much older than they are. You know, this one, I mean, this one looks pretty old, but 1924. Probably, I would say, early 1800s, possibly late 1700s. There won't be anything earlier than that in the graveyard, I wouldn't have thought. So look at the Bishop's Palace here. And this has been converted into a lovely garden. And it's kind of a little retreat area where, especially in the summer times, beautiful flowers, as you can imagine. And but any time of year, it's just lovely to step in here and be some quiet. This bench is particularly, it's called the Hope Bench. And it's designed specifically as a place where people can come and just contemplate, have a little bit of peace and quiet, and it has beautiful flowers around it in the spring and summer months. And there's little kind of walkways through the trees when everything's in leaf and everything's in bloom. But the good thing at this time of year, we get a really great view of the palace. And, you know, the old bishops, they didn't want to commute far. They didn't have a very big commute, did they? From his great palace to his main altar in the minster. It's you know, just a few short steps. Dawn, you're right, it is a lovely place to read. Lovely place to have a little picnic and just sit and have an ice cream and just sit and relax. And people do kind of treat it that way as well. You know, you don't really get sort of local kids coming in here sort of making a noise and that kind of thing. Now the corner tower here is actually known for being quite a distinctive feature. It's one of the best preserved medieval latrine towers in England. You know, a latrine tower, a place where you had the toilet and sewage facilities, and it has up on the upper floor a four-seater toilet set, which is quite very rare to have a four-seater toilet in such an old building. And then you have from there you have the drop down, and this is a steps down here, down into the pit at the bottom of the latrine tower. And somebody, I doubt very much that it would have been the Archbishop himself, is periodically going to go down there and clear it out. That's a nice job. Got to get what work you can. What a great latrine tower and a beautiful palace building, and I love it. This is a lovely space with the bird song, and you can see some of the birds. We'll see a lovely blackbird on the grass, and here's some of the birds. Oh, maybe it was penance. Maybe it was like, you know, whichever of the clergy had got the least new members of his congregation. It's like an incentive scheme for the clergy at the minster. Yeah, so that's a great view back to the Bishop's Palace, to the minster. Just see the top of the minster towers, and that is where we are going to end. So I'm going to turn it back onto me, and hopefully you've enjoyed this. You know, it's place that most of you have probably not heard of before. And as you know, I like doing tours of places where you might not have heard of it, and because there's always history, there's always links, there's always stories, and as we've seen here, there's always a lot of beautiful areas to be found, even in places that are not super famous, and Southwell is definitely one of those. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Beatrice, for posting the link there. That is to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can find links to book my tours, and also on the Buy Me a Coffee you will find the Wishlist page, and on there you'll be able to find the next set of community funded tours. There goes the Ko-fi link as well, which you can also use to book the tours if you prefer to pay in US dollars and or using PayPal. You can go to the Wishlist page on Buy Me a Coffee, and you can there goes the link for that. Thank you, Beatrice. And we've got 2 current funds running. One's for a Peak District surprise tour, and one is for a tour of the town of Congleton, which is another place that you probably won't have heard of. It's not got quite the medieval splendour and the royal links of here, but it's got a lot of stories, particularly about the early industry, and some of some great stories and characters in the town as well. What's my sister taking credit for here? Suggesting Southwell to me. Yeah, you see, I didn't really know this garden was here, and Emma knew the garden, and so she brought me here in the springtime, and we had a lovely time. And I said, yeah, we're going to have to do a tour here, and so here we are. And so thank you for that, and thank you for everyone who has supported this. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the fund for this one. Please do head over to Buy Me a Coffee, to the wish list, and whatever you can put into the funds for the next tours. You know, it all climbs up, and when the pot's full, I'll go and do those tours for you. My next tour, my next event is part 3 of my Houses of History talks. That is on Tuesday at 8 o'clock UK time. If you haven't watched the first 2 parts, there's not, you know, you won't be missing anything. You know, you still understand the third part. They're individual talks, so just dealing with different houses, different themes each week, and the first 2 are still available on catch up as well if you want to watch the recordings of those talks. On Tuesday we'll be talking about the aftermath of what happened here in this Bishop's Palace. Charles I arrested, later beheaded. There was an uprising to try and restore the monarchy, and his son Charles II lost the Battle of Worcester in 1651, and he had to try and escape. And our Houses of History talk on Tuesday is going to be all about his adventures trying to escape, and how the people who owned those 2 houses in the Midlands, Boscombe House and Moseley Old Hall, how they helped the future king on his way. So really fascinating episode in English history that runs through Tuesday's talk. Thank you, Beatrice, for posting the links for everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for your support, your good humour, your company. And I'm delighted that we had such lovely weather and we were able to enjoy Southwell much more than we actually would have done if we'd have done it in the pouring rain on the original day. So thank you so much, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Have a great weekend. Thank you to you. Thank you again to Beatrice. Thank you to Claire for keeping an eye on all of the tech things for me, just in case. And I will see you all very soon. Bye for now, everybody.
That was really good. Everybody
How was it inside?